She cleaned their offices. She lowered her eyes. She endured their insults in silence. What they never imagined was that the woman they humiliated owned everything they stood on. Before we dive into this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. The headquarters of Kova Industries rose like a monument to ambition in the heart of the city. Glass walls reflected the sky. Steel beams cut through clouds. Inside, marble floors gleamed so brightly that employees often joked they could see their futures in them, if they dared look too closely. Every detail of the building spoke one message clearly. Power lived here. And at the very top of that power sat Mr. Victor Harrington. Victor was the kind of man people feared long before they met him. His name alone could silence a room. He was sharp-tongued, decisive, and unapologetically ruthless. To investors he was a genius. To competitors a nightmare. To employees, he was a storm that could strike without warning. Victor believed one thing above all else. Weakness had no place in success. Mistakes were punished publicly. Emotions were dismissed as excuses. And anyone who slowed progress, no matter how small their role, was expendable. That morning, the boardroom buzzed with tension. Executives sat straight-backed, tablets open, eyes alert. Victor stood at the head of the table, reviewing quarterly reports with a cold expression. Numbers rose. Profits soared. Yet his face remained unreadable. "This," he said sharply, tapping the screen, "is still not enough." No one dared respond. Outside the boardroom, life moved differently. On the lower floors, where decisions weren't made but consequences were felt, a woman quietly pushed a cleaning cart down the hallway. Her name was Elena Moore. She wore plain clothes. Her shoes were worn but clean. Her hair was always neatly tied back. She moved with quiet efficiency, careful not to disturb anyone, careful not to be seen. Most employees barely noticed her. Some didn't notice her at all. Elena had learned long ago that invisibility could be a form of protection. She cleaned offices early in the morning and late in the evening. She wiped fingerprints off glass walls that reflected lives far removed from hers. She emptied trash bins filled with discarded plans, half-written ideas, and careless waste. She listened without meaning to. Voices carried in hallways. Conversations spilled from open doors. Names, numbers, strategies. Elena heard it all. And she remembered. That day, as she quietly mopped near the executive wing, the boardroom doors swung open. Victor stepped out mid-conversation. Irritation etched into his face. "I don't tolerate incompetence," he snapped to his assistant. "If someone can't do their job properly, they shouldn't be here." His eyes fell on Elena. The bucket, the mop, the quiet presence. And something about it annoyed him. "Hey," he barked. Elena stopped immediately and turned, lowering her gaze respectfully. "Yes, sir." Victor gestured at the floor. "Is that how you clean? There's still a mark there." She looked down. The marble was spotless. "I'll go over it again," she said calmly. Victor scoffed, loud enough for nearby staff to hear. Unbelievable. Even the simplest tasks require supervision these days. People slowed their steps. Ears tuned in. No one spoke. "You cleaners think this place runs on your convenience," Victor continued. "This is a company built on excellence, not excuses." Elena said nothing. Silence, to her, had always been safer than defense. Victor turned to HR, who stood nearby, visibly uncomfortable. "Fire her," he said flatly. "Effective immediately." A sharp inhale rippled through the hallway. Elena looked up, not in panic, not in anger, but in quiet acknowledgement. "If that is your decision," she said softly. Victor frowned. No pleading. No tears. No apology. That irritated him even more. "Clear your things and leave," he said. "Security will escort you." Elena nodded once. She placed the mop back into the bucket with deliberate care, wiped her hands on a cloth, and straightened her posture. As she walked toward the elevators, whispers followed her. She didn't even fight it. Was she expecting this? Who gets fired like that and stays calm? Victor watched her go with satisfaction. To him it was just another problem removed. Another insignificant figure erased. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Elena Moore wasn't just a cleaner. She was the reason Kova Industries existed at all. And the board meeting, scheduled for 3 days later, was about to change everything. Elena Moore did not cry when the elevator doors closed behind her. The polished steel reflected her image briefly. A woman in simple clothes, eyes steady, shoulders relaxed. If anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed something unusual. There was no panic in her expression, no desperation, no fear of what waited outside the building, only resolve. The elevator descended in silence, floor by floor, carrying her away from the company that bore her fingerprints in ways no one could imagine. As she stepped out into the morning sunlight, the city moved on without noticing her. Cars rushed past, phones rang, deals were made. Somewhere above, Victor Harrington was already forgetting her existence. Elena adjusted the strap of her worn bag on her shoulder and walked calmly down the steps. She had walked away from far more than a job before. Before she was invisible. Years earlier, long before Kova Industries became a corporate giant, Elena Moore had lived a very different life. She had grown up in quiet spaces, libraries instead of playgrounds, notebooks instead of toys. While other children dreamed of becoming famous, Elena studied balance sheets and business journals left behind by a father she barely remembered. Her father, Samuel Moore, had been a visionary. Not loud, not arrogant, not cruel. He believed companies should be built with integrity before profit, and people before power. When others chased fast success, Samuel built slowly, deliberately, brick by brick. Kova Industries had started in a cramped office with second-hand furniture and a single rule written on the wall. Never forget who makes your success possible. Samuel died unexpectedly when Elena was still young. And the company, his life's work, was left in the hands of men who smiled warmly at the funeral and rewrote the rules the very next day. Board members, investors, executives who saw opportunity where Elena saw legacy. They told her she was too young, too emotional, too inexperienced. They offered her shares, settlements, promises of protection. But Elena didn't trust promises. She trusted observation. So she disappeared. Not out of weakness, out of strategy. Why she cleaned her own company. Years later, Elena returned. Not as an executive, not as an owner, but as something far less threatening. Cleaner. She watched how decisions were made when no one believed they were being observed. She listened to conversations executives assumed were private. She learned who lied easily, who bent rules quietly, and who believed power gave them permission to humiliate others. She saw how fear traveled down the corporate ladder, how cruelty was disguised as discipline, how silence was mistaken for ignorance. And she learned one truth with absolute clarity. Power reveals character faster than wealth ever could. Victor Harrington had risen quickly. Brilliant, yes. Efficient, absolutely. But Elena saw what others ignored. The way he spoke to people who couldn't fight back. The ease with which he dismissed livelihoods. The satisfaction he took in public humiliation. He had turned her father's company into a machine that produced profit and crushed dignity. So Elena waited. Not for revenge. For certainty. The day after the firing. The next morning, the executive floor buzzed with excitement. An emergency board meeting had been scheduled. No reason given. No agenda shared. Victor arrived confident as always. He adjusted his cufflinks, nodded curtly at assistants, and took his seat at the head of the boardroom table. He assumed the meeting was about expansion. Perhaps an acquisition. Another victory to add to his record. The board members entered slowly, quietly. There was tension in the room Victor had not anticipated. Folders were placed on the table. Thick, sealed, official. One board member cleared his throat. "Before we begin," the chairman said carefully, There is a matter we must address. Victor leaned back slightly. Go on. The chairman slid a document across the table. Victor glanced at it, then frowned, then sat upright. This isn't possible, he said sharply. The chairman met his eyes. It is. Another document followed, then another. Ownership records, legal filings, signatures. Victor's fingers tightened around the pages. Where did this come from? He demanded. The room remained silent for a beat too long. Then the chairman spoke the words that would fracture Victor's certainty forever. The majority shareholder has chosen to reveal herself. Victor looked up. Reveal herself, he repeated. The boardroom doors opened, and Elena Moore walked in. Not in cleaning clothes, not with lowered eyes, but with quiet authority. Her posture was straight, her gaze steady, her presence unmistakable. Victor stared. Recognition flickered. Confusion followed. Then disbelief. That's impossible, he whispered. Elena stopped just inside the room. I believe, she said calmly. You fired me yesterday. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. And for the first time in his career, Victor Harrington realized he had made a mistake money could not erase. The boardroom did not breathe. Not a chair moved. Not a pen clicked. Not a single executive dared to shift their weight. Elena Moore stood in the doorway as if she had always belonged there, which in truth she had. The polished glass table reflected her image now, sharp and unyielding, a quiet contrast to the uncertainty rippling through the room. Victor Harrington remained frozen. For the first time in years his mind failed him. Cleaner. The woman he had dismissed with a wave of his hand. The employee he had humiliated in front of an entire office. She was standing before him not as staff, but as ownership. This is some kind of misunderstanding, Victor said at last, forcing his voice steady. Security must have. No, the chairman interrupted gently. This meeting is exactly where she belongs. Elena took a step forward. Each footfall echoed like a verdict. The truth behind the silence. I never intended to reveal myself this way, Elena began, her voice calm, measured. But sometimes, truth arrives when silence is no longer useful. Victor searched her face desperately, as if hoping to find anger, arrogance, or triumph. He found none. Only clarity. My father, Samuel Moore, founded this company, she continued. He believed success meant lifting others, not standing on them. A murmur rippled across the table. Victor's chest tightened. He remembered the name now. Of course he did. It had appeared in the company's earliest documents, spoken in hushed reverence during his onboarding years ago. But the daughter. No one had ever mentioned a daughter. I stepped away, Elena said, because I needed to understand what this company had become without my influence. She gestured subtly toward the executives seated around the table. And I learned more than any report could have taught me. Victor's defense. Victor pushed his chair back and stood. I built this company into what it is today, he said, his voice rising. Profits tripled under my leadership. Expansion broke records. You can't deny results. Elena met his gaze evenly. I don't deny your intelligence, she replied. I question your methods. She turned to the board. Growth that demands fear is not leadership. It is control. Victor clenched his jaw. You hired me to make hard decisions. I entrusted you to protect a legacy, Elena said quietly. There's a difference. The room leaned toward her now. Not because she demanded attention, but because she commanded it. The moment of reckoning. Elena placed a folder on the table. Inside were reports. Employee turnover rates, anonymous complaints, footage timestamps, documented incidents of public humiliation. Victor's hands trembled slightly as he scanned the pages. I watched how people lowered their eyes when you entered a room, Elena said. I watched how talent left quietly. I watched how fear replaced loyalty. Her voice softened. And I watched how easily you dismissed someone you believed had no power. Victor looked up sharply. She met his eyes. You didn't fire a cleaner, Elena said. You revealed yourself. The weight of the words crushed the room into silence. The decision. The chairman folded his hands. Effective immediately, he announced. The board has accepted Miss Moore's recommendation. Victor's breath caught. Elena Moore will assume full authority as owner and interim chair. The words rang like a bell. Victor staggered back into his seat. This isn't happening, he whispered. Elena approached him slowly. This is happening, she said gently. And how it ends depends on what you choose next. She leaned closer, not to threaten but to offer truth. You can leave with your dignity, she continued, or stay and learn what leadership truly means. Victor's pride screamed. His instincts rebelled. But somewhere beneath the armor of ego, something cracked. He had ruled through fear. And now fear ruled him. Aftermath. Word spread quickly. Not as gossip. The cleaner. The owner. The woman no one saw. Employees whispered in hallways. Executives avoided eye contact. Hope, something long absent, began to stir quietly through the building. Elena stood alone by the window, looking out at the city below. She had not come to destroy. She had come to restore. But restoration required truth. And truth always demanded a price. Behind her, Victor Harrington remained seated. No longer at the head of the table. No longer certain of who he was without power. And for the first time, he understood something no balance sheet had ever taught him. Some lessons are learned only after everything familiar is stripped away. The fall did not come with shouting. There were no dramatic escorts. No raised voices. No slammed doors. Victor Harrington walked out of the boardroom the same way he had entered countless times before. Straight-backed, composed, impeccably dressed. But everything had changed. The hallway that once parted for him now stood still. Employees pretended to work. Conversations dissolved into silence. Eyes followed him, not with fear but curiosity. Some with quiet relief. Others with disbelief. For the first time in his career, Victor felt invisible and exposed. The empty office. Victor returned to his corner office later that day. The room looked the same. The city skyline still stretched endlessly beyond the glass. The desk still held framed awards, polished and proud. But the power was gone. He sat down slowly, loosening his tie as if it had suddenly grown too tight. How did it come to this? His mind replayed the moment over and over. The calm authority in Elena's voice, the way the board leaned toward her without question, the silence that followed the chairman's announcement. Not anger. Not revenge. Certainty. That was what unsettled him most. Victor had built his life on dominance. On being the sharpest voice in the room. On making others feel small so he could feel large. And now, he had been undone by a woman who cleaned floors without complaint. A woman who had watched, waited, measured, and acted. Elena's first move. Elena Moore did not take Victor's office. She left it untouched. Instead, she chose a modest corner space overlooking the operations floor. From there she could see people, not numbers. Faces instead of spreadsheets. Movement instead of margins. Her first announcement was simple. No speeches. No grand declarations. Just a memo sent company-wide. Effective immediately. All departments will undergo a listening review. Not audits. Not inspections. Conversations. People didn't know how to react. They were used to commands, deadlines, consequences, not questions. Managers grew nervous. Executives whispered. Middle management braced for impact. But Elena moved quietly. She sat with interns, listened to security staff, shared lunch with receptionists. She asked one question repeatedly. How does it feel to work here? First people hesitated. Then the truth began to flow. The cost of fear. Stories surfaced. Public reprimands. Ideas dismissed without review. Talented employees pushed out for questioning authority. The culture Victor had built, efficient, profitable, ruthless, was finally being named for what it was. Fear-based. Elena documented everything. Not to punish, but to understand. She believed accountability without cruelty was possible. And she was determined to prove it. Victor's invitation. 3 weeks later, Victor received an email. No subject line. No formal language. Just a request. If you are willing, I would like to speak with you. Elena. Victor stared at the screen for a long time. He could ignore it. He could refuse. He could tell himself he owed her nothing. But something inside him, the part he had silenced for years, was tired. He agreed. Meeting. They met in a small conference room. No glass walls. No grand table. Just 2 chairs. Elena arrived first. She stood when Victor entered. Not out of obligation. Out of respect. That unsettled him more than anything else. I expected something different, Victor said carefully. So did I, Elena replied. They sat. For a moment neither spoke. Then Victor exhaled. I don't know how to exist without control, he admitted. The words surprised even him. Elena did not respond immediately. She let the silence work. You were very good at building systems, she said at last. But you forgot they were meant to serve people. Victor nodded slowly. I thought strength meant never bending. And now, she asked. He swallowed. Now I realize strength is knowing when to kneel. A test of humility. Elena folded her hands. I'm restructuring leadership, she said. Some will leave. Some will stay. Some will start again from the bottom. Victor met her gaze. And me. She studied him. Not with judgment but curiosity. There is a role, she said. Not as CEO. Not as executive. His chest tightened. As a consultant, she continued. Reporting to others. Listening more than speaking. The offer hung in the air. It was not punishment. It was choice. Victor closed his eyes. This was the moment. To cling to pride. Or surrender to growth. Slowly he nodded. I accept, he said quietly. The shift. News of Victor's new position spread. People watched closely. Would he rebel? Resign? Explode? But he didn't. He arrived early. Left late. Spoke less. And for the first time he listened. Elena observed from a distance. Not to control him, but to see if transformation was real. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it was. Elena's reflection. Late one evening, Elena walked through the building after hours. The floors gleamed. The lights hummed softly. Voices from earlier in the day still seemed to echo faintly. She paused by the janitorial closet. The place where this journey had begun. She rested her hand on the door. Power, she realized, was not about revealing who you are. It was about revealing who others can become. And tomorrow, the company would face its greatest test yet. Because change, once begun, always demands completion. The transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded the way dawn does. Slowly, softly, almost unnoticed at first. But once the light arrived, nothing could hide anymore. A company reborn. 6 months after Elena Moore was revealed as the true owner, Harrington Global no longer felt like the same place. The tension that once clung to the air had loosened. Meetings were no longer battlegrounds. Voices that had been buried now spoke freely. Elena had not dismantled the company. She had realigned it. Departments were restructured, not around fear but around trust. Leadership evaluations were no longer based solely on profit margins, but on integrity, collaboration, and accountability. People were promoted for character as much as competence. And for the first time in years, employees felt seen. Victor's long walk. Victor Harrington felt the change more than anyone. Each day, he walked through the same halls he once ruled with absolute authority. But now, he carried no title that commanded silence. No presence that froze conversations. He was simply Victor, a man learning again. First, the adjustment was painful. He had to submit reports to people who once avoided eye contact with him. He had to accept feedback without deflection. He had to acknowledge mistakes publicly, something he had never done in his career. But with each act of humility, something unexpected happened. The weight on his chest began to lift. He slept better, spoke more honestly, listened more carefully. And slowly, people stopped seeing him as the tyrant he had been. They began seeing him as a man trying to change. The question he couldn't escape. One evening, Victor stayed late, reviewing operational data in a shared workspace. Elena passed by quietly and stopped. "You've changed," she said. Victor looked up. "I didn't think I could," he replied. She studied him for a moment. "Why did you fire me that day?" she asked. The question landed gently, but it cut deep. Victor leaned back in his chair. "Because you were quiet," he said honestly. "And I mistook silence for weakness." Elena nodded. "That's what the world often does." He swallowed. "I built my power by stepping on people who didn't fight back," he admitted. "I told myself it was efficiency. But it was fear." "And now?" she asked. "Now I understand," Victor said, voice low, "that the strongest people are often the ones who don't need to prove it." The board's final test. As the company's profits rose, higher than they had been in years, the board convened a special session. Executives expected a celebration. Instead, Elena stood and made an announcement. "I am stepping away from day-to-day operations," she said. Gasps filled the room. "I didn't come here to rule," she continued calmly. "I came to restore balance." She turned to the board. "I am appointing a new CEO." Eyes darted. Names were whispered. Then Elena said the one name no one expected. "Victor Harrington." Silence fell like a curtain. Victor's breath caught. He stood halfway, unsure. Elena raised a hand. "Not the man you were," she said. "The man you chose to become." She faced the board. "He knows this company's structure better than anyone. But now he also understands its people. He has been tested, not by power but by humility." The board deliberated briefly. Then, unanimously, they agreed. Victor remained standing, stunned. "I don't deserve this," he said. Elena met his gaze. "No one ever does," she replied. "That's what makes it responsibility, not reward." The apology. Victor's first act as CEO was not strategic. It was personal. He called a company-wide meeting. When everyone had gathered, he stepped forward. "I once believed leadership meant never admitting fault," he said. "I was wrong." The room was silent. "I humiliated people. I dismissed voices. I confused fear with respect." He bowed his head. "I am sorry." Some people cried. Some remained still. Some nodded quietly. But all listened. And in that moment, Victor Harrington became something he had never been before. Leader. Elena's last walk. On her final day in the building, Elena wore the same simple clothes she always had. She walked through the halls one last time. People stopped to thank her, to shake her hand, to tell her what the change had meant. She smiled. She listened. She moved on. At the entrance, Victor waited. "You could have destroyed me," he said. Elena shook her head. "That would have been easy," she replied. "Transformation is harder." He paused. "And more powerful. Sometimes the ones we overlook are the ones holding the truth. Sometimes power hides in silence, and strength wears no title. Pride builds walls, but humility builds bridges. And when life humbles us, it is not to shame us, but to teach us who we were meant to become. Because true leadership is not about who stands above others. It is about who lifts them up." If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a like. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next captivating story filled with love, lessons, and unforgettable moments. Until our next story.